Hi, everyone. My name's Tom Slater, Director of T2S Architecture, and your host for the Design and AI podcast. Design and AI wants to focus upon how artificial intelligence is influencing and impacting the world of architecture, design, and the creative industries through candid conversations with those building the future. AI is powerful, but how can human creativity, endeavor, and innovation evolve alongside it? Today, for our second episode, we're delighted to be joined by Cristiano Coretti, co-founder and CPO of Layout and architect. He's turned to the dark side. We won't forget that one, Cristiano, but amazing to have you on the show, sir.
Yeah, so my name is Cristiano. I'm an architect indeed. I co-founded Layout 5 years ago as a way for me to speed up the process of design. I thought there are a lot of processes in architecture that are very mundane. They tend to be very repetitive. People, in particular in architecture, tend to lose this kind of feeling of you just do a function multiple times. You don't know that you can actually speed it up. And that's why I thought, okay, there has to be a better solution because for me it was like a painful process I've been through multiple times. And I thought, let's find a solution. And then I met my two co-founders that actually allowed me to realize my dream, for example. So that would be a starting point.
Amazing. Well, there's a lot of there's immediately there's a lot there, certainly in terms of what you're talking about, efficiency, productivity, high and low value tasks, which is kind of the point of what I think you're saying in a roundabout way. But quite interesting to see how you got there. Obviously, you've talked about you're an architect and we've gone on to have a more what you'd say entrepreneurial background. So can you take us through that journey?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting one in a sense. I will say every architect, I think, has a bit of this spark inside. In a sense, like every architect has creativity side. It's pretty much what creates the foundation of our profession at the end of the day. So you want to create something. And at the end of the day, like architects, that you always have to find a solution to problems. So when you have a design, when you have a lot, when you have a site, you try always to find solution and ways to fix problems. And that is actually what came to my mind. I wanted to find a solution to a problem that I personally had, and I thought I was alone until I find other people had the same issue. So sometimes pretty much took me from being so I'm Italian of origin. I moved first to Turkey because I was doing a research at the time. And then I moved to London, where I lived 6 years working at a consultancy firm in the UK. And while seeing so many projects, because of course I had a lot more access to projects to see, to learn from top firms in the UK and the world, projects that were developed in the UK. I then started to think maybe there has to be a better solution for this. But in the UK, initially, I didn't find the right time, the right inspiration, the right even investor that actually helped me to build this combination. And then COVID arrived. It was a great time in London. I think everything I loved about London in that period of time was not very fun. And then on LinkedIn, I had this very fun pop-up advertising saying, are you a designer? Do you have ideas in architecture that could be applied with technology? Well, why don't you apply to this program called the Antler in Oslo? And I was like, Oslo. Why would it was so strange, so out of the blue in a LinkedIn ad. I was like, this is super targeted. I was thinking about something like this, but not thinking about moving. So I thought about it, I applied. I thought, well, how many people do they apply? I think 10,000 a year or something like that. Will they ever get me? No. But well, I went through the process, the screening, the interviews, and then I got in. So I was lucky enough that at my old job, I could take a sabbatical. So I said, the program is 3 months. At the time, it was 3 months. I will take 3 months instead of going on holiday or nice Australia, like another like Bali and so on. I said, okay, let's try. So I paused my job. I said, okay, let's go there and try. I started in Oslo during COVID. It was complicated. We went on a newspapers, me and my co-founder, because we created a company out of COVID, and it was actually quite particular time for everyone. So I met my co-founder Wouter in that was joining the same program in the quarantine. That was this space for pretty much doing a quarantine before entering the country. We started the program. I had this idea and others. So I sparred with him and others during the program. And in the program, they were looking for people with ideas, but maybe didn't know exactly how to create it. They needed the co-founders. And I needed a co-founder that I couldn't find normally in my day-to-day life, like friends and so on. And then there were other motivated people there that wanted to start. I met my co-founder and we got our first investment funding from there. It was a small amount, but enough to kick off the company with advice from them. So they told us how to create a company. I've never created a proper company before. So it was actually a good kickoff. And then from there, pretty much the company grew itself. Now we are 5 years ongoing. We are 24 people. Started in two. We met the third co-founder. 1 month later, we got the funding, Isaac, that is Norwegian. And so now we are 24 people and then pretty much growing in 50 plus countries. So in reality, it is quite an interesting journey, I would say.
That's incredible. And actually, very similar age to T2S. I set the company up in COVID as well. And I always found it is quite a good time to set up because it certainly from an architecture perspective, because it's almost meant you've got remote working built into the way the company works. Pre-COVID, companies didn't do remote working. Work from home was never a conversation. Even the idea of using Microsoft Teams was who used Microsoft Teams before COVID. So the idea that we've set this company up at that time has meant we've had to build that into the way that we are. And I'm sure it's the same with you guys as well. It also helps save from straying eyes. So you can do all of this scheme in the background, right? Very much in the comfort of your own home in a way that perhaps in your office, you couldn't do the same. What sounds interesting now with you is that you talked about that you went through the architectural process. It sounds to me as if almost it was never going to be enough, that you had these ideas running around in your mind, that it was because architecture is a name. And because it's a name, it can be quite containing, right? You're in a little box. It sounds to me as if you were just one of those guys that you never wanted to be contained with that. Would I be right in saying that?
Yeah, 100%. It has been, I would say, I think the moment which I decided to look at something different is when I felt like, okay, I learned enough. I want to do something more, but I know that if I was staying in that position, I couldn't outgrow. I was outgrowing it in terms of what I wanted to achieve. And I've seen a lot of friends of mine, colleagues, former colleagues from university and so on, they grew a lot in terms of also their roles. But then they maybe end up doing a project for like 3 years in which you redo the same thing over and over and over and over and again. And for me, I like challenges. I like something that I can constantly think on how can I change this. And at one point I was even growing, even in my past jobs at the same time, I got to a point in which, okay, I did enough. I don't know what else I can do here or if I will do this for the rest of my life. At one point I said, okay, let's try it. I'm at the right age in which I can still risk. I would say take a risk. Of course, not always you can do it. I thought, okay, I'm still okay. I can take a risk. It's worth it maybe to do it now. If I don't do it now, when I will ever do it? And so I just took a bet on myself. And I had to say I'm a very insecure person. So in reality for me, I had to admit I was depressed. I went through all the journey of, let's say, super happy, super sad, crying in the middle of the day, like I don't know if I will ever go out from here and so on. And then, we are still here. But it's, I mean, everyone that goes through the process knows what I mean, because it is starting a company like you probably experience yourself. It's not always only ups. You have a lot of ups, downs. You lose a job, you lose a contract, you are there like, what happened? It's my fault. And then you start to build a bit more like bigger shoulders, we say in Italian. So it's like you start to build up your confidence saying, okay, maybe this didn't work out, but next time will be better. And then you build your confidence in the project and what you're working on. So
yeah, what I would say to that is setting a company up. It's like a mirror, and all you're doing is looking at yourself, right? And if ultimately the company reflects you and who you are, and so getting you right, as sort of cheesy as that sounds, it's important, because if you're not at it, if mentally you're not correct, if even physically you're not right, the company is going to suffer, isn't it? So focusing on yourself, and it isn't self-indulgent to do that, is actually better for the company. So making sure that you have a little bit of time off, and as you say, psychologically and mentally confronting things that you have in the back of your mind, those insecurities of those issues that you've had in the past, because they will manifest themselves moving forward if you haven't truly dealt with them. And I went through a very similar process during COVID as well. And it was great for a few years from my perspective. And then it was really tough. We had a bad year where everything happened all at once, but now we're back stronger. But it is interesting and quite nice actually from a business owner to listen to other business owners share that same journey of almost not emotional turmoil, but that confrontation of yourself.
It is. But I would say put the stress on as a emotional journey, because at the same time, for example, both me and my co-founder, initially it was one co-founder that then we got the second one very shortly after. So even if both me and Wouter, my co-founder, we are from different culture, we had some experience we carried from our previous jobs. So he was coming from a different background than mine. He is more business. So of course he has a different type of spark in terms of ideas and so on. And we all said that we want to be a transparent company, very honest. We want, for example, to be very direct with our customers, and it has been pretty much what we have done so far. So even if you can find people that like it or not, we say, we can do this, we cannot do that. It's not that we try to say to you like, yeah, we do it, but it's not true. If we can't, we tell you straight away, we can't. Or we are actually working on it, because it's actually true. And then a few months later, they're like, you did it actually. So I actually can believe that you're delivering this. And it's something that also from the perspective of a remote first, me and Wouter, we were both in a position at the beginning, which we were in jobs in which it was not really possible to relocate. For example, COVID, as you mentioned before, allowed the people to work from home. I wanted, for example, to see my family more often. From the UK, it was COVID. I said I can go and work from Italy. It was not allowed at the time, so it was something impossible to think. So we said, we want to create a company which everyone has the freedom to be where they want. They need to deliver what, of course, it is part of their job. But at the same time, if you're working from a camper van or you're working from the top of a mountain, it's up to you. The only thing is, it's pretty much allow people to be creative, to be happy with their environment. And that I think is what helped us also to grow as a team. I think now we are 10, 11 nationalities. Over 24 people is quite a lot, but still allows us to have pretty much give this openness and freedom of movement to the team. That it's what made us pretty much what we are.
Amazing. And a true globalist by the sounds of it. So there sounds a lot of that you had a very strong idea when you set Layout up, the type of company it's going to be before we get into actually what the company does. So how did that manifest itself? Did you have like a mission statement, or did you have like an office culture that you extend to people when you brought that in, or did that just sort of develop naturally over time?
I would say there was an initial statement. So reality for me, like I wanted to save time in a mundane process that I could see, that had to deal with. I could see my colleagues were moving little things here and there. For example, in a design, it was not only about offices. We chose office as a target because it was after COVID, and during COVID, it was office was the most impacted. So the one that needed more change. So of course, if I need to put an impact, create an impact on the world, is the best time is when there is a strong event that changes it. That's why office is where our main focus. But it was more like to have an impact, a positive impact on people. So the idea was to use AI not to replace a designer. The idea was I give you something that allows you to do the job 10, 20, 50 times faster. So you can still do what you do. The only thing you are not going to need to actually rotate by 5 degrees a desk to allow you to be completing a design. Is not that what we are meant to be. And I think for me was like in many stages, I literally had to physically move walls by 5 centimeters on the left to place a extra toilet. It's a joke that I made to my colleagues, but actually it's real. I've seen this done multiple times by people trying to squeeze a little thing here and there, and you spend so many hours. I've seen people burn out multiple times, and I thought it was something that we are not meant to do that. If there is technology that can help us, there's no point in literally ruining your life on things, and then you see people that lose their passion for architecture. And I love architecture. I just think that there are many things that can be just spent. So yeah, that was pretty much the goal initially, and the company didn't change. So itself, the statement is still the same. 5 years ago, it was just automating part of the process, and we are just getting from there to do more steps within the same flow. So You can automate the images, you can automate the positioning of certain things, you can adjust certain spaces. Still, it's more about the same flow, just made it faster.
So what sounds interesting, Cristiano, is you keep referring back to this passion for architecture. So you still got that fire, if you will, and that passion. So where did that come from?
I would say it's a very interesting question. It's my background is in architecture. My family, entire family is in architecture. So it has been pretty much like something that I grew up with. I've been on a construction site when I was on a post chair. So reality, not the best environment for a
No,
child, for a baby. Yeah, I mean, it was literally like how I grew up. So reality, I've seen pretty much every aspect of architecture, from literally physically putting bricks and wires to actually seeing the project part, building bridges and so on. I've seen every aspect. My mom was on more the legal aspect, so I know more about quantity surveying, assessing values of properties. My father was on construction sites. I grew up like that. So the passion is still there. I like the fact that an architect can do all of this. You are an architect, but you are very much allowed or able to do multiple things. So that is something that allows you to never get bored on doing a repetitive task. That's why for me it was like, I really care that actually people around me can not just get depressed on doing repetitive tasks, but just enjoy the part of design. Design is the creative side is what every architect aims for. And that is what I hoped also to create with Layout, because at the end, architecture is a beautiful field that tends with in a lot of spaces to be very repetitive. And I want to remove the repetition to allow you to actually just keep always creating, be faster at creating, just be more, having more this spark preserved. Because I've seen a lot of people that actually lost it simply because I have a very close friend of mine, spent 5 years on one project. He simply quit his job, started to do something else simply because he was literally doing one thing for 5 years, same thing over and over. And it's really no point for us to do that.
Yeah, and it's a well-trodden path of architects going on to different things along the way, either because they're slightly jaded by it, or perhaps they've worked in practices where the focus is more on the grind side than it is on the creativity side. Yeah, it's quite common for architects to move on to contractors or even developers and another means. But I still think that architecture as an education, it's amazing because I think it's
So
the
yes,
best design course to do, because it teaches you how to think in 3 dimensions, which is not many people can do that. And you can always tell when you're thinking and talking like an architect, because you can visualize in your mind the way something's working, and everyone else around the table is kind of looking at you like you've got two heads.
yes,
They'll agree with you and they'll say, yeah, yeah, yeah. But really they're thinking, I don't have a clue what he's talking about, because we've gone momentarily into that slightly different world.
yes.
But was there any career highlights you had pre the development of Layout? Was there anything that you worked on that really sort of inspired you, or what you would consider to be a highlight architecturally?
I would say like there's not a single event, it's like a series of events, because of course as thinking this way, like I come from Italy, where pretty much using technology was not a thing. At the time when I left Italy, there were literally, I was doing courses of parametric design and so on, but it was very niche. I was talking with officers like, why would you do that? You can do it manually. I said, it's not the same. Then I moved to London and actually started to work and see so many large projects. I started to see like how actually projects were delivered, because I was consulting on how to maximize, for example, volumes of buildings. So I was suggesting if you change slightly the shape, you can make it better. And start to see that actually architecture firms were taking my, for example, envelope and creating shapes inside of it actually started to make me feel, okay, I'm actually responsible for many of these big developments. I started to see like, okay, I can do this, but it's not the only thing I want to do. I want to also see how I can improve these things, not only from the outside, but also the inside. I saw a lot of people were doing work on the outside, and then I thought, but inside is where I live. I care about, for example, I saw how much work there was in changing the office where I was. During COVID, we were literally going around with this 2-meter stick shift the desk to be far away from each other. It was hilarious because I thought that has to be, that is, I mean, it was a period of time was completely out of
It was
the
a strange
world.
time to look back at COVID, isn't it? To think of what the world that we lived in. And actually,
Absolutely.
were you living in Italy when COVID? Because Italy, the first country in Europe where it just not literally
It
exploded.
was, it was bad. I mean, I
Right.
know I was living in the UK, so in reality, I was already like many years in the UK. The reason why I wanted to move to Italy, at least to work from Italy, was mostly because I wanted to be with my family. My parents are not super young; they were not very well, so I wanted at least to be there. And the borders were closed, so at that time it was very complicated. And that was also the reason why at one point I said, okay, if I cannot go there, I need to find a way out. And then the way out became starting something on my own that I could handle from abroad. So I started in Oslo, I stayed there in Oslo, but then I was back and forth in Italy 10 times more than what I used to do before. That was pretty much where everything, in a certain way, sparked. It was like, I have a problem, I need to find a solution. If here I'm locked, I cannot find a proper solution here, I need to create it myself. And that is what you as a designer, maybe that is why also what you said, architecture gives you so many opportunities. It just many people think it's just about sketching something. You find solutions, and you will see, you even search how many jobs people with architecture background does. You go from fashion design to actually creative industry, filmmaking. Is impressive. And that is actually what allows you to create something out of thin air. So it's a pretty much a very important element of the process, understanding how to solve problems. And what we are doing at Layout is pretty much that, try to find a solution to. We have clients that come every day asking us, I think it would be great if you could do that. And maybe we have already other 20 people that mention it, so we prioritize that development so we can actually adapt and adjust. I think it's a great part of what we do is try to find solution to real problems by real people. And once we solve them, you should see the reaction they have. I was like, this is what I said a few months ago. I said, yes, we actually care to listen. And that is something we pride ourselves and we tend to be known for.
Yeah, and so just as I think we'll sort of put part one to an end a little bit, but I think there's two key things that have come out of that that I find really interesting. And the first is the way that I think London, the architecture world, it tends to embrace technology, and I think that is true. I think architecture is at the sort of not the frontier of AI, but I think as a profession, we're one of the few that's actually been working with this for quite a while, right? You go back to Frank Gehry and Zaha Hadid. Those parametric software that they invented was
Absolutely.
a version of AI, where it was human beings directing and guiding the technology to create shapes that human beings can't draw. And another thing I just quite like to end on was that idea of talking about invention being a reaction to almost a constraint. You saw it, there was a challenge, there was an obstacle, and there was something that you couldn't do. And that therefore was the nucleus for you, for you to create something, which is so often the case. So on that note, I think we'll end part one. And then in part two, we'll get really down into the AI and layout and how that works. So thank you very much.
So pleasure.
Right, hello, everyone. This is part two. Part one, of course, we delved into Cristiano's background. Now we want to dig into Layout. So Cristiano, can you take us through what Layout does and the process?
Absolutely, yes. So Layout is a software that automates the design of office space floor plan. It's meant to be a solution that speed up your process of thinking, creating, and shaping an office space. So right now we are focused mostly on offices, but of course we are looking at other spaces to expand our software.
So it uses AI to generate what you would say a office layout automatically without humans getting involved effectively. Is it guided? what sort of constraints and parameters does it need? Do we need to give it to generate what you want?
Say there is always a human in the loop. So reality, the full flow of layout it works in combination with constraints. So reality, as we were talking in part one about constraints and you find solutions. So every designer knows that there are some set of constraints in every space that are physical in terms of like structure, elements of the building, accessibility, and so on. And regulations. Regulations pose a constraint into the design. You need to follow certain rules. So there is like let's say a hierarchy of rules. I need to set distances from emergency exits, a distance from windows, a certain type of shapes, or distance even around a chair to stand up from a workstation. You need to have a certain clearances. Well, layout takes this into account. So regardless where you are, if you are in Italy, if you're like in London, if you're in Norway, if you're in the US, pretty much the full system works that learns from these regulations and creates a space based on that. And then you can iterate, also having the human that can say, I like this part, keep it, change that part, make it into a meeting room. So you can guide this process, making sure that your final design is actually based on generations that are way faster than a human can. Because, of course, so these are generated in maybe 3 seconds to generate options. You click on one, you can iterate on that single item until you get to a final design.
Okay, so we can go back a step then, because you talked about Antler. You were responding to an advertisement of where it was about architecture and also about technology. So was that, were you aware of AI at that point, or was it was it whilst you were at Antler where you were introduced to AI, and that's where you were able to put the two things together?
Would say is a very good point. So of course I'm an architect, so I didn't study myself how to develop AI systems and so on. Of course I had the idea, I knew how I wanted to solve some problems, but I didn't know which technology to choose from. And of course I was looking for people that could build it with me because I knew that myself that it was a heavy lift, too heavy for me to lift, and I wanted also to have people that could go against me in a sense, like just spar with me saying, okay, this solution can work, this solution doesn't work, we can find ways around it. That's why where, for example, Wouter jumped in, or Isaac, that is our CTO, that is a background in particle physics. In that sense, actually what helped is like he found ways or applications that we could use to actually develop the solution. So reality, he literally built from scratch a system that allowed us to do what we want. So reality, our software is not based on plugins or other solution from other software. We had to start from scratch. It took many years to develop and it's still evolving the way we move forward, but that has been the starting point. So Antler opened my eyes in terms of like the many possibilities that were there. I had, of course, ideas before on how I wish the output to be. But of course, the technology in particular was something that has been developed.
So your co-founder developed the AI technology from scratch.
Yes. So we literally built the team starting from there. Our team was made by physicists, not even architects, because in reality, architects have the visual solution, but in reality, it's in the mathematics, the problem. So in reality, every item that you see around you, a round table is a circle. A chair can be a rectangle. So you have all these items that they need to have a certain relationship with each other, certain type of shape, dimension, rules. And pretty much what they created is a very powerful mathematical model that allowed this to be placed. There are numbers that have architects in mind, that architects keep in mind. I know that I need to have certain proportions, and the algorithm is placing them, but following criteria that were placed by architects. So in reality, we just had to spend quite a lot of time in translating what an architect would do and translate into mathematical terms. And then this, of course, developed the software itself. So in reality, it has been just a starting point. Many options, many ways in which you solve a problem, and then find a mathematical model for it.
It's interesting you say that about mathematics and architecture. Just to digress ever so slightly, I went to see The Odyssey by Christopher Nolan, and obviously that's really inspiring people to get into the classics, right? So that Greek mythology that has perhaps been lost in the education system, all of a sudden it's going to inspire people to reconnect with that. And so when I think about architecture and I think about mathematics, this is not a new thing, right? This is this is golden proportion. This is the Fibonacci sequence. These are
Absolutely.
the bricks, the foundations for what we consider to be something that's beautiful is actually just a mathematical sequence. So the linkage there between architecture and mathematics has been there for 1,000 years since we built the pyramid.
Way back, think about the Egyptians, think about all the proportions, the structure, the weights, the engineering side. So in reality, there is a background in that. The only thing is like we lost track of many of these things because also like we think about constraints as a block into in the creativity process. Instead, constraints and what we wanted to prove, we lay out that even with X amount of constraints, you can develop something. Just usually people dwell in the constraints thinking, okay, this is a problem. We have so many constraints. What we want to give is like an opportunity. I see a constraint, I need to give you an option for it. And that is actually how, before we were talking about my journey, I saw I was locked in a certain way. I needed to have a way out. And what was the best way out is creating something that I could control myself. Layout gives you that, gives you a solution in which you have a space that has certain rules. Then I give you 10, 100, 1 million options so that you can move through and build your options to escape your constraints. So that is, and you can of course keep always that in check. And so mathematics is at the base of everything we have done. So for sure, it's important to think in that way, that everything can be reconnected in that. So you see also, digressing a bit, mathematics is used also on sailing. So if you see like all the competition, the America's Cup, all the designers there are mathematicians, physicists, mathematicians, because you can create a beautiful object with mathematics and you can control the hydrodynamics, the aerodynamics, and so on, because it's all part of creating a beautiful object just following certain constraints that are the needs of the client at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's geometry, so that you direct the sail in the opposite direction to the wind. So it's basically a triangular shape in a way. You've got wind, sail, and direction of movement that you want to go in. And a boat is effectively displacement because it's displacing the water as the object in the sea. So do you think that touching upon architecture in the future, moving forward, do you think there will be a necessity to have more than a basic knowledge of mathematics? Do you think that will help?
Not necessarily. I will say it is a plus to know, but it's not necessary because there are so many. You can see also like in programming. If you think about it, before people had to learn a new language. It's like me learning from Italian, learning English. It's a new language and a new mechanism on how to associate things. Now we have many of our developers are using AI, are just literally prompting and changing things. Of course, you need to have the basics so you can check what is correct and what is wrong. But still, you can enhance your skills even with just a basic knowledge of how things work. So I would say it will be more fundamental for architects to know AI, to know how to control it, because it's unavoidable. And most of my days are spent with people that sometimes think that AI is a threat. And of course, if we want to look at the gloomy side of it, could be a threat, of course, but it's a threat for people that don't want to learn it. We went in architecture from drawing by hand, using CAD, using BIM, and now there is a Gen AI. It's literally like a generational shift. And of course, people that grew up in one system say that the next one is bad, or it has a lot of threats. My parents grew up drawing by hand. They see me using CAD, BIM, and so on, and they think, what is this? I can do beautiful things by hand. And I agree, they are better than me at drawing. Impossible to compare. But still, the time they do a one sketch, I do 50 buildings. It's just the way of evolution.
Do you think though that as the technology develops, it's not going to be a linear path, is it? We will use it, but there will be ups and downs. And in a way, I wonder if the drawn by hand art form perhaps may become a little bit more of a niche, but the respect it gains will increase because we move into a lot more of a digital age. Do you not see that there will still be a place for drawing by hand, won't there? And there will still be
100%.
if for people that want that style of architecture, and if people can offer that as a skill, that will always be the case, because it's the skill of being, it's the immediate connection between your head and your hand, and you can do it straight away. I accept that what AI does is it removes the boundaries of people that aren't architecturally trained to create something architectural, because the skill of 3ds Max, Revit, Vectorworks, or whatever you don't need that anymore. You don't need that anymore. But the skill of drawing by hand will always be there.
Absolutely. I would say there will always be that space, but you also see now that, for example, you can take a sketch, for example, you can design something by hand that you have in mind, so you can transfer your knowledge and creativity on a piece of paper without having to create on 3 Studio Max or other software that is, of course, more time consuming to get there. You can take a sketch, with AI, you can bring it within the model. So in reality, you can even do this transition in which your creative object can shift directly to a virtual world where you can actually customize it and make it more real. So it is pretty much, there is a lot of space for that. And of course, the creative thinking of designing something and just placing it into a context, it's still something that will be always there. I still think that the role of an architect is not just clicking a button multiple times to hope for the best. It's more about guiding this process, because we know what is a context. We know what is the reason why we place something there, why this room is there, is not there. You can still guide that. And at the same time, what is important is the taste. You choose an architect, for example, who goes to Zaha Hadid is because she has a certain style, a certain type of output you expect from the studio. You go to Foster and Partners for the same principle. It's more about understanding what is your goal at the end of the day, and the taste is what pretty much will drive every client out there. So it's always human.
And that sort of judgment that you've talked about, where the decisions that we are making will always, we're capable of making those decisions in a slightly different way than a computer will make them. And I think that our judgment and our emotional intelligence, which is kind of the same thing, is where we'll have to focus upon, because that's what the brand is. Because you talk about Foster's and Hadid, so they have brands, and I mean, certainly Zaha Hadid has been at the forefront of the usage of, you might not call it AI, but certainly the creation of computer-led buildings as opposed to human-led buildings. Humans can't design the buildings that she designed. You can think them, but you can't draw them. And so
Yes.
the computers have been helping and inputting there anyway. And again, where I think architecture has been at the forefront of this, but the human decisions and the spark of the idea, we will always have that. So I think that's something that we will be able to hold on to, but that's ultimately down to talent. And
that is why, anyway, you want people to have skills for it. So reality, talent, skills, taste, because anyway, it's for every business, you need to have this kind of consideration of the value that a person brings to the table. It's not just, I'm using the computer better than you. You can use AI, we can be here creating beautiful images, but then how you put them together with the context, how you put them together, how to realize the space. That's something that anyway will take and will need anyway like a human in the loop. So it's more about how skilled you are in adapting and using these solutions for your output. And that is
why I perhaps
what large firms do.
And that's why I wondered whether mathematics would be quite an interesting base for architects moving forward, because you talked about how architecture needs to be able to learn how to use AI properly. And ultimately, AI is mathematics. And my thinking is that if you have more of a mathematical mind, you're more likely to be able to align your thinking with AI than someone that hasn't, because you're thinking that iterative trial and error sort of way of thinking. Just moving briefly on to Layout. Obviously, it's an AI tool, but in terms of the day-to-day running of the company, do you use AI to run the company itself?
Yeah, I mean, we are still humans, so we are not bots. But other than that, yeah, we use quite a lot. So it's, I mean, we are still lucky that we still interact with each other in terms of human interactions, sparring, decision making. It's more like a very human centric. But in terms of developing, I would say we constantly revisit, rechange, test new AI, new models, and so on. I would say just for images, we did maybe 3, 4 different iterations. Every few months, there is a new one. We had to shift to create models. We started from CAD, we went to BIM, we test different solutions just because the output that we want to achieve is always evolving and we want to give you more data. So in reality, clients come with data, but what is data? Data could be for you something, for another one something else. So we get very different type of requests and we try to shift the solution that we work with to adapt to those requests, to the speed of it. So I would say models like Fable, for example, have been a game changer for many of the developers. But I mean, it's something that is evolving all the time. So you never know what comes next.
It's a moving target at the minute, isn't it? We're using Higgsfield, and Higgsfield only allows you to subscribe for a year because they say we don't know what this thing is going to be in a year's
Yes,
time. So the subscription for this is now. In a year's time, we don't know what you're going to be committing to because this thing is just it's incredibly powerful what you can create using Higgsfield, but also the technology is at that sort of it's developing such that it's difficult to sort of hone down what it's all going to be. But just the day to day running of the company, so sending invoices, dealing with clients or whatever. Do you have sort of AI agents or anything like that that allow you to do those? You imagine a company having high value tasks and low value tasks in a way that architecture has the same. So are you applying the same principles to the application to your business as
absolutely.
well?
Absolutely, yes, it's a fundamental. So reality depends by the team internally to the company. Each team has their own solutions that they use because to streamline their job. It goes from error notification, customer support, customer success. We have notification, for example, on Slack that help us to target what type of error there is. So we already know what to prepare to answer to the request of help, for example. Or sales for example, engaging with customers, having a certain type of profiles mapped and so on. So it really depends by the team. But yeah, there are many solutions we're using. I don't even know how many, because in reality, every time there is we have a need that came out from a research, we did the market research, and then based on that, we find a solution that can adapt to that. And that's the beauty of AI, as we were saying before. You cannot subscribe to something for more than a year because you don't know what is coming maybe in 3 months from now. That's why we as a company, we need constantly to search for new solutions and it test to adapt based on our needs. So
Hmm.
it's also difficult for a startup in a sense because, sorry, not for a startup. If you are an established company, you have processes that are more rigid. And you see that for us, we change things on a bi-monthly basis as an average. So you have things that constantly change. And of course, some people love it, because love the constant change, the evolution and so on. And of course, it's not for everyone. Some people will just like the predictable. I go to my office, I do this job for 8 hours, I go back, and it's like a routine process.
Nice. So that's just just a sort of final comment. What do you think moving forward, design, architecture, that industry and AI, how do you see those two things developing next to one another in the next 5 years?
I would say, I think honestly that there will be a lot more need to the people to adapt to this technology. It's not because I sell it, just because I see it in practice. I see it in real life. I sit with people that actually say, it takes me 3 weeks to get something that I can get in 1 minute. And this is only my very narrow niche space, but it is constant. People tend to have very little attention span. It's getting more shorter and shorter. So you need to actually develop something that helps you to keep up with the times. I see a threat for architecture wherever people are against it. The more you are against it, the more it's difficult to actually to understand how you can use this solution to make your life better. And I think in the coming years, I would say universities will have to take a very big part on this development. And I see there is still not a lot done in that side. I go and talk with some universities and they have really no idea what is technology in different parts of the world. Still have maybe experimental projects where they show maybe a PowerPoint presentation of something that is already 1 year old or 2 years old. And then, of course, doesn't help because people go out in the work environment and they see that there is a world out there and they still don't are not able to keep up. And that is where you get the problems in the adaptation. So still think there is space. There is a lot of space for creative thinkers, but it's more about adapting to the space.
Adapt or die, basically. And I think
Yes.
I would wholeheartedly agree. On the university side, I recently went to my old university in Liverpool, and I was quite impressed that they were engaging with it. I've heard stories of other universities that, you know, we don't use AI, and they were using it and they were encouraging their students to use it, which was great. And I think that the universities are going to play a key role in this because they have to. It's also about warning the students to say that you have to. This is just a commercial reality for you in your career that you're going to have to embrace that technology. But I think we'll end there. I think that was a really good discussion, but I definitely do like the adapt or die mantra because I think that's 100% the case. When I hear architects say that they're not willing to engage or any way with this technology, I just think you're not going to survive 5 years because this is going to move so quick. But do you have any final comments? Any final word?
I really wish for people listening to learn to adapt because these things are coming. If you will, I mean, you can will it or not, but they are coming. So I think the best suggestion I can give is indeed learn how to use it and adapt because it's giving you so many options and opportunities. And of course, happy to help if there are questions following up this.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Cristiano. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Really interesting talk, and I hope everyone's enjoyed listening. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Take care. Thank you.